biggest obstacles I see with women is that we worry so much about what other people think. I mean, I went through it. Oh my gosh, what are people going to think about Business Goddess? Oh my God, that sounds kind of, that's not serious enough, and I had to go through my own process of, being okay with that and being willing to put it out there into the world. And I see that happen a lot with my clients. They're so afraid of, what are my colleagues going to think if I start sending out a newsletter? What are my colleagues going to think if all of a sudden I start getting successful or I'm more successful than they are? Or, what if I get my book published? What will my mom think? I mean, just everything from your mom to your husband to your kids to your colleagues to, your clients. And they really get caught in that, and it can keep them just kind of on a hamster wheel of, staying in the same place.
Yeah. That was really driven home to me the other day because I am aware, I'm kind of hyper-aware of what other people think. When you're doing marketing, you kind of need to know what people think and what works.
Right.
Yeah. But then there's another side of it where you realize that it's just somebody's opinion. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I was doing a teleclass the other night, and they gave me an evaluation form at the end because I did it with this other company. And one person said that the presenter needed more enthusiasm about the subject. And the other one said she was vibrant and enthusiastic, and she held my and I thought, there you go. It's just all in the eye of the beholder,
It is. It really is. Yeah, I've had that happen too. And, and I always like to, I take that kind of information, and, you take it in, like, what is there to learn from it? What's it pointing me towards? But then you also have to realize it's coming from their perspective. Yeah. So, if they get triggered by the word goddess, for example, then, that's not really my stuff. It's really maybe something they need to deal with,
Right. Yeah. 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 So, and you don't need to get everybody. You just need your people.
That's right. That's right. And that's the thing to remember. And I think that's where people, when they get caught, what do other people think? And it's like, well, there's going to be a lot of people who don't agree with you, but they're not your clients. Mm-hmm. But the people who resonate are going to just, oh my gosh, they're going to be like scrolling your site saying, how can I get more? Mm-hmm. And I think that is a hard place for people to step into and accept and learn to be okay with, is that some people aren't going to like you, or they're just not going to resonate with you. It's not their way. And realizing that they are not your ideal clients.
Yeah. Now, do you think, we're touching on this, and I think it goes back to a fear, maybe embarrassment, do you think? Maybe you're afraid that what other people are going to think, or you're going to mess up, or you're going to fall flat on your face, or...
Yeah, all sorts of fears.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, and, they can't let it go till it's perfect, or, which is related to what other people think, or they might be afraid of failure, afraid of doing it wrong, or it's just never good enough, or, just a lot of those, stories. I find when you're marketing yourself, especially as a solo entrepreneur, a lot of those stories you have, from your younger years about being seen, being heard, really show up, because now, especially as a woman, you have to find that way to elegantly self-promote yourself. And, a lot of us have been giving a lot of stories when we grow up about, I always got the, be seen but don't be heard. And actually, I don't really want to see it too much in a loving way, but it was still like, you never felt like you had permission to, just fully show up in your joy and your brilliance. And so it makes it hard to market when you get older, when you got to market yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. You gave me a little tip of something. As a child, my father would teach me things and then have me show off for his friends. There was never a time that I was not encouraged to be seen or heard. And that's probably why I'm always putting everything out there, It's like,
right.
You learn it, you share it. You got to, it's just part of the process,
Right.
But I forget that other people...
You don't have that little hurdle to get over.
Yeah, other people don't have, they didn't have my dad. He was unusual, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Count my blessings there, I guess.
My parents, loved us dearly, but they were just brought up with a more, that you shouldn't put your joy in somebody else's face. Kind of thing, And that's why I ended up calling my business Center for Joyful Business. It was like, I get to claim my joy.
Well, good for you.
So it's funny because it's like those stories then, come back and then you're marketing yourself and, you've got to live with those stories. Or some people weren't, they don't put things out until it's perfect. And, gosh, you can't do that or you'll never make any money,
Yeah, you got to put it out.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips for people in overcoming these fears that we're talking about?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think one of them is realizing you're not alone. And so the more that you can, have really good colleagues, what I call business girlfriends to be able to talk to, the more you can work in a good mastermind group or work with a coach. I mean, that is invaluable for being able to move your business forward and not getting stuck in these traps, these self-limiting stories. And I think when you're in a group, I see that especially, my groups, it's like the women are like, oh my gosh, other people think like I do, like they're afraid of doing this, or, their fears come up and they see it mirrored in somebody else, and they realize, okay, it's just a limiting belief, and I can shift this, and, I can do this. And I think that's one of the most powerful things, is not to try to do it alone. I know I've always had a coach of some sort, all throughout my own business and my own business life, and I can't imagine not having somebody to lean into in that way.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, one of my practices is, and I know you do this, is asking for guidance. It's another form of not being alone, not trying to do your business alone. But when I'm coming up with something and I find that I'm procrastinating or I'm resisting or stuff's getting triggered, one way or another, that's when I know it's time to start journaling, doing my mind maps, and asking for some guidance, like what's going on here and what needs to shift, and sometimes just having it, just journaling about it is amazing how all of a sudden you realize, this is about...
Yeah, it's huge. Journaling is huge.
It's very huge. Like when I was doing my first workshop, through journaling, I was trying to figure out why I was so excited about it, but I kept putting off making a decision. And it was because I was nervous around the contract for the hotel. And I realized, I always had this pattern in my corporate career. I would negotiate and do all the right stuff, and then right when it got to that, you got to sign the contract, I got all nervous and would procrastinate like crazy. Like, I can't actually sign it because what if something's wrong? I don't know what I don't know,
Yeah.
And then so through the journaling, you can realize that, and then you can, again, ask your coach, ask your mastermind. You've got the outside people, too, that you can ask for some guidance on.